I'm Darian on Books, and I'm here with another author interview. Today I'm talking to Pat. He writes high fantasy with lots of strategy and military background in it, which I think comes in handy from his current background. So, Pat, can you introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you?
Sure. So as Darian said, yeah, Pat McCluskey. Writing high fantasy, hopefully maybe a bit more like grimdark fantasy. We'll see how dark I could get eventually. That's kind of where we're looking to go. Have one book written, of course. We'll be trying to get it queried and published sometime soon. We'll be getting there eventually. So, but always wanted to write ever since I was little. The classic bane of everyone who loves fantasy and wants to get into it. Finally decided to get into it a couple of years ago after dedicating myself to writing a little bit more in college. I was a STEM major in college, so never really had any sort of professional writing background. Just listened to podcasts, listened to like video essays on writing, got into it there. Had my book idea, started putting some things down, then joined the army, kind of just kept up at it. Had my world building documents, had my outline, had things on paper, nothing really official. And it was actually one of my commanders while we were deployed who had published his fantasy novel through the program I then eventually went to, took me under his wing, and then that set me down the path. Just graduated from our program, Darian and I went to, and then here we are. I've got my first book written, and now just gotta actually start querying.
And how's that going so far?
I'm currently on my post graduation sabbatical where I'm just leaving the thesis rest. You let the steak rest after you cook it. So I'm gonna give it maybe another month or so, and then I'll come back, read it with a fresh set of eyes, and then we'll start querying. And I I tell myself that like one more month, and I really hope it's not gonna be like 3 months from now. But that's the plan.
Yeah, it's that gap year after college, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so on that, you mentioned that you write fantasy, grimdark. Tell us a little bit about the thesis you published in our program, your book,
Oh, okay. Do a little elevator pitch.
and go.
And all right, we're ready here. Yeah. Okay. So set on two intersecting worlds, we have our human medieval world, and then the new world. You know, and we have Zahn, who's our main character, but then mainly focused on this new world where my fantasy races exist. And one thing that sets them apart is that they're born without the ability to feel fear naturally, but they can impose it on each other through kind of like a force of will. That's pretty much like our magic system, but it's a bit more of like a biological system. So Zahn, the main character, he's born a human but has this ability as if he were this other race. So it follows him as he kind of traverses the barrier between realms to fulfill a role that's been, crafted for him to overthrow a dictator that's come into power through a cycle of tyranny in this new world. So some similar themes, portal fantasy, a bit of that hero's journey. We try and mix it up a little bit with heroine's journey elements, and just overall a little bit more darker themes that someone in high fantasy might not be familiar with. So that's just a bit overall large swath there for the thesis.
I like that. So, this imposition, which is one of the words you use in
Yes, that's
yeah,
the name of the system.
imposition,
Yep.
it's very unique, and I've never seen anything like it before. Where did you come up with the idea for this and using fear as like the big differentiator between this other race and humans?
Oh yeah, I came up with that idea. I think so. I first had the idea. I think everyone does this. They come up with a cool idea when they're like 14. I'm gonna write this, and I don't think anyone besides like Christopher Paolini actually does it and is successful. So I came up with the idea when I think it was 15 or 16. Like I forget. I called it Control originally, which is just a terrible name I think for a magic system. And I changed it of using fear to overpower somebody. I had none of the nuances worked out or how would work instead of just being a really soft magic system. And I had to make it a little bit harder, a little bit more definitive so you could understand it. But yeah, I don't know, it just kind of popped in my head in my youth. And then I was like, that sounds kind of cool. Let's try and make this actually tangible for this book, and I don't know if it actually worked out. We'll see.
Well, I think it worked out really well. Having read many, many, many of your pages.
Yeah, pretty much all of them, right?
All
Yeah,
the pages.
yeah.
And it is a very interesting system. And something else that's really interesting is that you actually developed an entire language for this race, which doesn't
Oh,
appear
yeah.
in its entirety in the book, but a lot of the words do. Um, why and how did you do that?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Hard task.
yeah. So I think at my core, as all writers are, I'm a masochist. And I'm like, obviously, I will never be Tolkien. No one will ever be Tolkien. But I'm like, you know what? I could make a language for this. So, so I've got some language training in the army. I know a couple of other languages. So I did the typical fantasy writer thing. This is also back in college where I was just throwing things on pages just because I had no idea of structure or how to make like a just a tangible plot. So I was like, oh, what if there was like an opening chapter in their language after my character undergoes a transformation from human into this new race? Just like that'd be cool, right? So I didn't make a dictionary, anything crazy like that, of course. And I made like the grammar rules, the syntax rules, and I just wrote it out. I had like I think a page and a half in this language, which like forms the basics for all the grammar for the new language. And not like I took influence from like Spanish here, from like a little bit of Russian here, and then just threw in random cognates, threw in random rules I just made up on the fly. And I had the intention of putting it in, but that would probably just like weird readers out because it's there and nowhere else. And like I'm not going to expand this into like like a glossary. I'm not going to do like a Silmarillion of like here's this language. So I just scrap it, but I still have it in case it ever comes up.
Well, it sounds like that would be a really great like reader extra for your diehard
Oh
fans.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could. Yeah, maybe down the line it could.
Awesome. Very cool. So, as you came up with the language and everything, and then did you start writing before you joined the program? And then what changed about your writing process after you joined the program?
Oh god. Okay. Yeah. So like I wrote like the initial first pages after I came up with the very base idea when I was like 16, 17, which was just utter garbage. Like, of course, I think we all did that as young writers. And then in college, start getting the pages down, and it was okay. It was okay. It was, I mean, given the level, very novice level, it was okay. Now coming into like a graduate writing program, I think when I submitted my first 10 pages, I had some friends who were like maybe like English majors or who are other master's programs, other friends who like are all fantasy readers and lovers of fantasy, and give me some critiques and stuff. And so they gave me like good feedback. Now looking back at this first 10 pages, I'll think back on it fondly now. But I think after being in the program for like a year and a half, I think back. I think just the first paragraph I wrote of those first 10 pages we had to submit, it just makes me cringe because I used it just very bad. I think I described like the color red in like 7 different shades, just like not good. So I think the program helped just mainly. I think one of the big things is you get to read other people's work, which helps you see a lot of the errors that are in your work and the mistakes you're making. And then, of course, having a mentor who has publishing experience and knows the market trends, or just even knows just like my one of my mentors was very big on grammar, and I found out that I'm very bad at grammar, especially commas. And just overall, just want you to keep writing and keep writing, because I was very bad at just having just daily writing or a schedule to my writing. Because I would just write whatever at the time during college, during my military career. On deployment, I wrote a lot, but never really had a set schedule. I just did it whatever felt right. And then you can't write a book whatever if you're writing whatever it just feels right.
Yeah, so then you put yourself on a schedule, I guess, because you had to for the program.
I did. We had to. It would not have happened.
So what did that look like then?
Oh yes. So probably the as you understand, Darian, we're both in the military, the draconian standards. But, so I'm very militaristic of like, you will write X many pages every night. I don't care how you feel, you will get these or like these words down and open scrivener, get it down. Only then will you be satisfied. And I think while we were in the death throes of the program, I started with 300. I think it ended up to 500. Because of course I'm a masochist, I decided to write a massive fantasy novel.
How many pages exactly?
So first draft was 150,000 words, and then final draft, I know, right? Final draft was 138,000, which was 513 pages in Word, which is a lot.
Yeah, they made an exception for you, right? There's like a cap.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, like, hey, fantasy writers, keep it to like 100, 110 is pushing it. 110,000 words. I was just like, there's nowhere in the rules saying you won't let me graduate if I go above it. So I'm going above it.
Yeah. How would you cut 40,000 words? I can't even imagine.
They say you need to cut if you're a good writer, and I'm like, here's the thing, I'm not. Yeah.
We won't tell anyone.
Yeah. We'll wait for the world to find out. So anyway, so I would write like so many words per day, and I found that was really, really helpful. I think Brandon Sanderson was like, you just need to write every day, even if it's just what, like 20, like if it's like 20 minutes per day, no matter how much you write. Or is it like Taika Waititi? If I'm getting that director's name wrong, I apologize, because I love that director. He said, like, what, even if I open up my laptop and stare at my laptop for 20 minutes, that's still writing. I a little disagree. I mean, he's a fantastic director. I love all his movies. But I would say you need to get the words on the page, even if it's absolute garbage. Because then, like, okay, then you have those words, and then the next day you can make it better, or you can change them, or you can just erase them, and then you get I would get another 300 words, and another 300 words. Because creativity doesn't just come, and you need to force the creativity. Because otherwise, it's just, you're not training your brain to be creative, and that's how we got the book done.
Yeah, it is very hard. In the program, I kept trying to do like a set amount of words each day, and it just never happened. And so I fell into, like, on weekends I would binge write.
There we go.
And like that worked really well for me, but it was also like exhausting. And so now I think it's becoming easier for me to, I think it's less pressure now. And so it's easier for me to go ahead and be like, just 10 minutes. Like, that's all it is. Just 10 minutes, sit down, write something, or think about something. And in the last conversation I had with Sierra, she talked about using like a timer method, like a writing sprint time frame for brainstorming, not just for writing. And I was like, that is brilliant. Like, if I just sit down, I can answer some of those questions that are preventing me from writing, and then maybe the next session I can actually write it down.
That's really good. I also have the privilege of being like a single guy, and then, like, I was living with my fiance at the time, and now she's over in North Carolina while I'm here in California because of the Army. So, like, I could just come home and be like, oh yeah, I could just write for a little bit here and there. Like, I can make myself write every day, but like, of course you can have kids and stuff, and you can only like write in the weekend or just a different situation. But like, I'm just a hard believer. You need to have a schedule. You need to stick to it. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
That's why they pay you the big bucks.
Not yet.
Okay, so you told us a little bit about the writing routine. What does your writing process look like? So if you were working on a new project, how would you get started based on what you've learned, and how is that different from how you wrote this original book?
Oh yeah. So that's the process we're in right now, which I found, so a little tangent before we get in there. I found it's a little rude not just to fully have a book already in my mind, ready to go, Because, coming to the program, you're like, I got this great book idea. I'm good to go. I kind of already know what's going to happen the first half, and we'll develop the second half. But now I'm like, oh, I have to come up with ideas and form a plot and make characters. And I'm like, this kind of sucks. I have to put some work in.
This is hard.
This, oh, I see why why like the second book is the hardest, you know? Okay, my general plan is, because I'm a fantasy writer, is like, let's world build first. Let's do the fun stuff first, you know? Because I just think of cool concepts. Like, oh, that'd be cool. I can make, like, we can make a religion on this. And or like we can make a world around this random idea I just came up with. And so I'm the perpetual. I love writing first chapters of books. You know, I love the short commitment. We'll come back to that later. You know, and now here's later. You know, future Pat has to deal with this. Okay, so base concept, maybe like a magic system or a world idea that's really cool, and then I'll just world build off of that. Try and flesh it out as much as possible, and because you get a lot of like good cultural notes out of that, which you know branch maybe some like linguistic notes out of that, and from there I think I'll come up with like a basic idea for a plot, which is a little bit difficult way to do it. I think some people usually come up like, oh, hey, this would be a good plot. Let's form the world around it. I just like making the world first, and then try and make an idea of what plot would fit in it really well. So I think having like just intimately tying in cultural notes, language notes, world building notes into the plot is just very interesting. So once I have that, then I need to like inputting the characters in those different cultures and seeing then how they would clash, and then tying to the skeleton of that plot is where I would go next, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. So I think who like my main character is going to be, who like they're going to be opposing in like the clashing culture, and like that's where I'm a bit struggling right now actually, because I need to come up with the other cool side characters, because I don't want to do just like, you know, just alternating POVs. I want some other people in there too. So once we have all of that, I think that's good enough to start with. I would then probably, you know, I'm a plotter by nature, so then plot out the main story beats that I want to do, and try and flesh it out as much as possible. So that way, when I'm writing, I like to stay on the train tracks as much as possible, and then allow like the characters to surprise me a bit as I'm developing out the world more. And then we would just start writing and see what happens.
Well, it's sounds structured, but then you're also like allowing room for some of the pantsing to happen.
Yeah, I think I was describing this to someone in the program. Like I like to plot out the big points, but then I like to pants in scene, because I'm like, okay, you know, chapter 4, this is the imagery and the foreshadowing I need to get across, or like the details, the mood. These are like the 3 characters in the scene. I have no idea what they're going to say though to get those points across, but I know they need to. And so I'm like, well, I know like my main character, let's say he's a brooding guy in the scene, and he's still coming up into his role. And we have like the antagonist, or like the next antagonist down, and she's like really manipulative. So I'm like, oh, that make her probably a little bit more snarky, a bit more, you know, condescending. So oh, that's probably how it would happen here. That's probably how it would happen here. So yeah, I like micro pants in the scene.
I like that, micro pants.
Yeah. That's kind of fun. That's just kind of fun. You're discovering writing a little bit.
Yeah. I tend to overplot and then kind of toss it out the window as the characters veer off in a completely different direction.
That's very Darian to say. Yeah.
Like, well, I don't know how many times I was in the chat talking to all of y'all, all my critique partners, saying like, I have decided to replot.
I think whenever you would write that, I was like, again, Darian. I'm here for it. I'm like, I'm down. Let's read what you got. But like, this is like the second time.
Thanks for all y'all's hard work. I'm starting over.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then, your current work in progress, is this like a second book to your current series, or is this something totally different?
Ooh, I'm trying to do something different.
Okay. Can you talk about it?
I love the world of my first book, but it's been a minute. So I am stuck between going to super heavy into a grimdark fantasy, just no shred of hope. You know, just as you like to do. What? So I was gonna throw a compliment here. I love what you do with your work, Darian, because you brutalize your characters. You love to make them suffer. So I'm just gonna lean into that in mine too with the Grimdark.
Yeah. There's nothing more fun than like just smashing them down and seeing how they can get out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. You gotta throw rocks at your characters. So really, just really lean into the Grimdark in this one. Or I've got a sci-fi piece in mind.
Ooh.
Yeah, which I know would excite you because you wrote sci-fi. But of course, with sci-fi comes the research, which is terrifying because it's gonna deal with like with some like there's gonna be AI in there where we're in the future, so like getting journal articles from my friend who's in her postdoc right now, and she's just sending me articles, and I'm like, oh, this is a lot, and it's very interesting, just on a Wednesday evening, having with a cup of tea, just reading scientific articles about like AI and post-digitalism and all this stuff. But it would be a lot of work. Or with this Grimdark, what I like to do is when I'm like falling asleep in a meeting, or if I'm just bored at work, and I've checked all my emails, it's like, okay, let's world build, and let's see what I naturally just want to do. And it's been that fantasy that's been coming to mind the most. And that one is the idea of, I haven't prepared an elevator pitch for this one, so it's gonna be a little tough. The idea of like a world where like you have the gods and the demons warred, and the demons actually won, and there's like two pools of magic, like deific magic and demonic magic, and humans could draw from each. But now that the demons have won, humans can only draw from demonic magic. But they're still like demon sovereigns that have now established rule over all of the humans. And there's one sect of a demonic society where humans and demons have formed a symbiotic society instead of forming like almost like a cannibalistic relationship between the demons and the humans. And so, what do you know? Demons and humans living in relative peace, and that has advanced that particular society significantly more than the others. And of course, what do you know? This is going to lead to intense war between everybody as they vie for power and influence and making their brutes stronger than the others. And main characters could be from that symbiotic society. And we'll see.
We'll see. Well, this sounds like a really cool premise. I love like the good and evil aspect and that evil one, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
So then that kind of veers us into your passion topic, which is world building, which you're already like showing that expertise there.
Oh, I don't know. I may not be an expert, but I love to do it.
Yeah. So how do you world build? Where do you start? What are the steps you use? Does this just kind of come into your head, or do you have some like steps you take to kind of build things out?
Let's see. That's a great question. I think I allow myself just to. I think I like to focus on the society, like language more specifically, especially like the. So if we're going directly with what I love, it's definitely the in-world terminology, because like I think every fantasy reader and writer loves world building. Everyone loves to do it. It's so much fun because it's just this like the sandbox where you can just make whatever you want. So I'll always start with the cool concept, like I said, which is how I start the book too. And I don't know if that's a good technique, but that's what I like to do. And from there, then I'll build the world around it. And when I like to, so after I like kind of build the world around it, I'll dive into the language more specifically, because that's where I think like the nuance comes to it. So if we're getting real nerdy into it, let's talk about like in-world terminology, because I think once you get like the base level world building done, it's time to get like the nuance and the subtlety of like language, because of course I'm a nerd and I love that stuff. And I took like I said I was like a STEM major in college. I was also like a Spanish major, so I took like some like linguistics classes and whatnot. So I was like, how do I make this just kind of a part of me forever going forward? So this is like it's just so intimately tied to the world and like different cultures, because everyone's gonna speak different languages, and you can't have like a translator all the time in your world, even though I think that'd be kind of cool.
That would
You
be
know,
really cool. Yeah.
it would be super cool. Like, let's see. I think like just having a general idea for how you want that that language to come across in the world is a good idea. Because like what I did with my language was, I think I got some notes over here I'm going to reference. It was like I had lots of like K's, J's, I's, and L's. So it's a very like guttural, consonant heavy language. So even like the words I made up, you could tell like, oh, that kind of like fits with like the linguistic mouthfeel, so to speak, of the language. So it's like, okay, that kind of makes sense that like, oh, you just made up this word. That fits into it, you know. And then I also had I like to just like analogs of the like words. So like a word like we know, let's say like in English, I like would make up like a new denotation for it. So we have like marking, which is something that was big, which is how like my people like communicated with each other through like little bursts of air through their throat. And it's kind of something like if you're like coming up with new in-world terminology, something to keep in mind too is that like you're just gonna have to change the meanings of some words just to fit your new language. And so I had to I'd be careful with that though because you have to like introduce it slowly. Like, hey, this word means this now. So like explained it, maybe mentioned it one more time, and then after that it was just like marking. And that's what that meant. You know now I've told you once or twice, and then but then you kind of have to do that like subtly for like every single word. And as you know, I had like my glossary that was really long.
Yeah. Very helpful though. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, like what else? Oh yeah, I like because then I had to keep in mind like so I had three races of people, and so generally there was like the lexicon that everyone used, but then there were some words that were specific to each race, which I loved. I loved getting into that, and I think like the most fun was coming up with the idioms, and like the idioms was like just different terms they used that were specific to the race, because that was just so much fun. Because like what's like I think overall, like, what does that race value? What do they fear? What do they hate? I think it's just something to really keep in mind because, like, my one race, who's you know, it's like a bit more of a collective race. They all work together. They're gonna value, like kinship most of all, and staying together, and collective effort, survival, and then like my Druidic race, they value, knowledge and sacrifice is sometimes necessary, but it's for the greater good. So how is that going to shape the world that they live in and the idioms they use or the random term or like the race specific terms that they use. So that was a lot of fun. And like but then linguistics also spans like the expletives and the slurs because they're also going to kind of hate each other sometimes and they're going to like each other sometimes, and there'll be terms for each other like, well, between these two races this word is okay to use, between these two races that word means that they hate each other. And it depends also on the context, or if they say it in a certain way with a certain tone. And I loved injecting that because then it makes it feel very culturally unique. Because just like we have certain terms in our world that if like I called you something, but like jovially, like oh he's just joking. And between like two different races of people, if I said something else, you'd be fighting, and that happens sometimes in my book. I think that just makes it fun.
Yeah, and I think this is where beta readers come in really handy, right? And critique
Yeah.
partners, because there
Oh yeah.
were many times when I was like, I know you've introduced this word, I can't
Yeah.
remember what it means. Can you make me a glossary? But then, you kind of figure out how often you need to say it when you have to reintroduce it. And you did that so well because you're right, you had so many new words. But by the time like you were in your final draft of everything, it was very seamless. It was introduced and we understood what it was, and reintroduced, we understood what it was. So it was that subtle repetition was then like, okay, by the end of the book we're like, yeah, this is just a thing. And it's one of those skills that I think can filter into pop culture, is like, by the time
Yeah.
you're this big bad very famous author, which you will be very soon.
We'll see.
words like marking and some of those other terms that you use throughout your book can be like really easily applied to into pop culture and things like that, like the Hunger Games, right? Now, may the
Yeah.
odds be ever in your favor. It's just something
Oh yeah, we
people
all
say
know.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one of those really cool things that comes from fiction. And speaking of words and things that you use, it was really interesting that you kept certain words as well. So like cursing at each other. There were some words that were in world terminology, but there were other words that you just kept as English because it's just in my opinion, it was just easier to do it that way because it comes across so much stronger and more viscerally when we understand our own context behind that word. What were your decision making processes in terms of expletives and things?
Oh, oh yeah, expletives were the hardest because like making yeah, I think Brandon Sanderson talks about this too about making specific expletives. He always said like he needs to make it like culturally distinct and unique, and he likes to do that for each of his books. And I try to do the same as far as like like what they hate. Like so my place of people can't naturally feel fear. Fear is still a very big part of their culture because they impose it on each other in battle, so they know what it feels like. But like the worst thing you could call a person in that world is to call them a coward, because that means that they are like either fleeing from battle because their mind is too weak to resist someone's imposition. So that's pretty much like you calling them like a base-born bastard, I guess, if you were to equate it to like a medieval terminology kind of thing. But having it like have the same impact as like let's say like fuck or something like that, it doesn't come across because even like when I said that, I'm sure like there was like a little trigger in your brain. You're like, oh shit, like that means something. So I think it's never gonna quite hit, but that's where like the world building comes in, and so you just kind of need to hit on it. And I think anyone who gets into the world building is going to appreciate it. But that's another reason why like I was considering doing like this sci-fi where I could have a little bit more fun with that. Mm-hmm. Then like this is like one of my mentors. So every time we come to our residency, we submit like a 10-page piece, and so I submitted the first chapter and a half of this sci-fi idea I'm working on. And so it's a very militaristic society, post robot uprising, so they're all living in a bunker, so it's a reduced humanity population. So it's like you will do this, you will do this, you will do this. So for the survival of humanity, we have to follow these very strict guidelines. So like militaristic rules for everything. And so with that, it's my main character, she's not a soldier per se, but she's a mechaneer, so she's a mech pilot, and so pretty much like a soldier analog. So let's just be in the society. So there's a scene where she's with like her fellow mech pilots, and they're just eating like MREs together, like little packaged meals, and they're just chit chatting as like the soldiers do, eating over a meal. I think any veteran would understand that dynamic, and fuck comes up a lot because they're just having fun being soldiers, And my mentor, the first thing he said when in the rather critiques was you need to calm down your fucks. And but when I was writing, I was already cutting him. I was like, there would be like, that's a little too much. Let me cut down. I put it in when it felt natural to the conversation. And this Rob Hart, by the way, in case you ever heard of him, fantastic writer, plug for Rob Hart. He's like, you have 15 of them in this 10-page piece. And I was like, I didn't even realize I was just throwing them in there whenever it felt right. He's like, bring that down to like 3. And overall, that is just generally good advice to cut down on your expletives. One, just to not detract from the reader's experience. I think he said like, generally readers will be turned off from expletives, which is good, something to keep in mind. But then when you do use them, they actually stick and they matter, which I think is kind of what we were talking about here. Or if like it's a good comedic moment, because I had a part where like I cracked a joke and my character responded with an F-bomb. And he's like, that's a good one. You keep that fuck in there. That's good. And like, or like at this point where like the tension's really high, otherwise cut the rest and the prose will be better. So it's not just like tying it to the world building, but also just, keeping the writing clean too.
And that's good advice in general, right? Is that we, as new writers, you really want to like mimic how people naturally speak. And so in a natural environment with a bunch of military people, especially mechanics and maintainers, they're gonna cuss a lot more than probably most other people, and that's just a
Yeah.
natural thing for them, like it is. But you walk into that environment for the first time as someone who's not a part of that, and you're just kind of like hit on, all angles with
Exactly.
some strong words that just they don't mean as much anymore in that group of people.
Yeah, I think we were at my job. We do like little morning, synchronization meetings before we actually go out. Like we observe units that are training, and so we have some civilian contractors that come in, like old retired guys that have been doing this for X many years. Absolutely fantastic guys. They know so much, tons of experience, but they're like little old crusty dudes, And we're having a meeting, and one guy started keeping the tally of how many f bombs were dropped, and this is like a 15-minute meeting, and I think it was upwards of like 50, 60 times. And so I'm like, that made me think of this exact moment where Rob was like, calm down on it. I'm like, dude, I was calming down on it. But like, no one, like for me, I was like, this is kind of funny. But for like a normal person who just kind of likes to read sci-fi would be very much overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, it's interesting how, again, like this is where critique writers and beta readers come in.
Exactly.
People who are not a part of that environment but are, readers and know the genre can tell you like, yeah, this might be normal, but not for other people.
Not for everybody. Yeah. No, like know your know the book you're writing, but know your audience too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about all the research you're doing when you're thinking about your sci-fi book. And I just happen to think like using those expletives and things like that as they relate to like sci-fi, if it's more militaristic, is also very applicable. But I wouldn't do that amount of research initially when I wrote mine. I was just like, this sounds like a cool idea, and then I'd go back and find the science behind it. And like, if there was science behind it, great. If there wasn't, like, let's just make some science real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like as part of world building, all those things come in together, and it's really interesting. You've also mentioned high fantasy and grimdark. Can you kind of give us some definitions? Because they're very different, but they can layer.
Yeah. So let's see. I've got some pretty good definitions for grimdark. I know. So high fantasy is like generally typical in like other world. You'll see magic systems, and usually it's like high fantasy, epic fantasy, usually a large roster of characters. That's pretty general. As far as the grimdark, it can either be a subgenre of high fantasy or just a subgenre of fantasy where there's like general themes of like hopelessness, amorality, ultra violence it's like the crowning theme. It's like just very violent and gritty. There will also be some themes of like sexual violence, which is generally not my favorite sect of the subgenre itself. And so they're pretty close as far as genres go, but it's just like the very heavy lean into violence and gritty realism that kind of separates the grimdark from high fantasy. So we'll have let's see, Brandon Sanderson, high fantasy. Then you'll have like George R. R. Martin, grimdark.
Okay, I've never heard it explained like that. I've kind of always thought, well, and I guess that does make sense because I've always thought grimdark is more like tragic endings, right? And I guess in George R. R. Martin, they are technically tragic endings. They're not, people don't necessarily win, they just kind of get out alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like grimdark's big on like the mood, and like all throughout it's just general hopelessness, and the characters are usually like generally, of course, like the lack of morals, or they're out on their own for their own morals, or doing it for themselves kind of thing, or like a twisted sense of morality different from our own.
Okay,
and it's always violent.
Always violent.
Yeah, violence is it's always violent.
I like some gore. I like bloody elements.
Yes, you do. But reading and writing, and that's why I love reading and writing.
How can we gross this my readers out a little more?
What was it? It was it's when Hawk, main character, is in the desert fighting the crab monster, and like one of her knees pops. I was reading that, so of course you know my writing. It's very bloody, and I was reading that part, and I recoiled. I was just like, oh. So if you made me cringe, I was like, yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed
That
that
was
very much. And that was motivating. Again, like it all comes back to having like a writing group is really important because that was my motivation too. I was like hearing how Sierra would react, how
yeah.
Emily would react, how you would react, and being like, okay, what can I do here to like get a reaction from them? It was very motivating.
yeah.
Okay. So as you have gone through all this program, all this experience, everything you've gone through, is anything come to mind in terms of like a big piece of advice that you can give new writers or writers who are looking to kind of up their game?
I think we hit on it, which was set a schedule for your writing, and I would say write every day in some aspect. That doesn't mean actually type on a keyboard or write in a notebook, but do some sort of do something that contributes to the writing process. At least if you're starting out, I think if you're a bit more than just a novice, if you're a journeyman, actually put some words on paper every day. Of course, adjust as for your life situation, but do something every day that advances your writing. If you're just thinking about it, doesn't matter. Do something. That way, it's always on the brain. It's, we made the decision to be writers, so it's actually we need to do it because so many people are like, "Oh, I'll write a novel one day," but then when you actually write that novel, you need to now you've done it. You realize, okay, well, writing a novel is so like half the battle, maybe not even. Now you need to write the next one. You know the next one. You query it. You get it published. You need to deal with all of that, or you maybe indie published. You need to deal with that too. It's a slog, but it's all on you. You got to do it. But it starts with actually putting the words on the page, doing the world building, doing the work. So get after it.
It's become helpful for me to remember that like writing the novel was the easy part.
Yep. Yeah,
As hard as it is, it's the easy part. Going back and editing it for me was the hard part because my ADHD brain wrote out of order and just decided to throw stuff in at random that I then have to go back and make consistent, and just it was a hot trash fire mess.
Yeah,
And
like props to you for being like pulling that all together. I think because like I did like I don't know, maybe this because I don't know how I did. I was just like, no, I'm starting chapter one. We're going all the way through. This is plotted out because I like so. I mean, revisions were a bear, but and like it was exciting. I'll just do it, just nug away revisions for like 8 hours a day. So it definitely sucked, but we got through it. But it was nice because then I did like all right, chapter one, chapter two, chapter three. All right, act one done. All right, let's move on to act two. Boom, 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 boom. But
yeah,
you had a very different process than I did. It looks like.
lesson learned though. I'm like, no matter what, because that also led to like the replotting. I'm like, oh, shiny new idea, replotting.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, okay, with my next work, I'm making a plan and I'm gonna stick to the plan this time. And then the next book can be the shiny new idea.
There you go.
That's
Yeah.
painful in its own way. Okay, so Pat, is there anything else on your mind you wanted to tackle or discuss before we kind of move toward the end of our conversation?
Let me see. Let me consult my notes. No, I think we hit on everything. I would say we'll tie it back to the world building stuff for your turns. Don't use them as one-offs. If you come up with a cool term or an idiom, use it multiple times. Because those people are probably gonna say it multiple times. At least 2, 3 times. Like obviously like your word analogs, use a bunch. you come up with a cool, funny phrase or like what people use for jokes, put it in there a bunch. Because then, like, oh, hey, what do you know? People actually say this. Besides that, no. Like, oh, maybe overall, have fun with your writing. Like it's gonna suck, but I think part of the suck is like enjoying it, because if you don't love it, then why are you writing?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a reason that this is a passion for people. And I think that helps me a lot, is because I think if you decide to make writing a career or a part of your consistent life and you want to put it out there and you want people to read it, for me, it kind of, the marketing aspect and the catering to readers and the how am I going to make money with this part kind of starts to pull you in one direction, and it helps me kind of balance back to remember I have to do this because I like it, because it's fun for me, not because I'm trying to make money from it or become famous or anything, because once you put all that pressure on it, it's no longer fun, and then I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah. So on that, before we close out, what are you doing to market yourself, to get your author brand out there as you start to query and get your book ready to push out?
Well, I started making a website, and I got intimidated and scared because the interface was tough to work with. So I'm about halfway through making a website right now, and I need to do that because I know that's helpful. So we will get there. Maybe when I have some free time here soon. So beyond that, I have my Instagram page, and that's where I'm at. And they say like delete all but 2 social media platforms. And I'm like, I got you beat, Chief. I'm on 1. And I post just weird stuff and like bird pictures and hiking pictures and the occasional writing post. So I think like the big thing is like, so if you can tell I'm a naturally kind of weird dude. So I think I'm just gonna post stuff that's just kind of funny and sticks to like who I am, my author voice, one might say. And I don't know, if people jive with that, cool. And I think people kind of just pick up on who I am as an author and as a writer, and then if they also like my books too, that's cool. Because I think my personality starkly contrasts with what I'm writing. I think I might be a little atypical in my personality versus what I'm writing. So I'm just putting out things that like portray who I am as a person to maybe attract people who kind of like that. So I'm not gonna try to put out this demeanor that I'm a serious author. I write Grimdark.
Black and white photo.
Yeah, do like the stereotypical, like get like the blazer, like the tweed, or like the turtleneck underneath, and just No, I like my writing. I'm gonna be smiling and stuff. I'm having a good time writing about violence and warfare. You should too. You should enjoy reading it. So that's what those are the vibes I'm putting out.
I like that. So, and I think that's also something important to keep in mind, is that a lot of writers are introverts by nature. I would say, from my experience and people I've met.
Yep.
Not all of them, for sure.
99%.
Yeah, but it's hard to put yourself out there as anybody. And as a writer, I feel like the creative side of things is where we all want to kind of hone in on. And then it's the talking about yourself side of things that everyone's kind of cringing away from. And so being just yourself and doing the things that are comfortable, probably the most sustainable way to keep up with it.
Oh, yeah.
So on that, Pat, where can we follow you on Instagram to check out these weird dude posts?
I'm on Patrick McCluskey Writes.
All right.
Pretty simple, yeah. And
What's your website for when it's ready?
I think it'll also be Patrick McCluskey Writes. We'll see if I'm going to use WordPress or Squarespace, but I'll pin it on my Instagram. So if you find me there, you'll find my website eventually once I get my ass in gear.
Awesome. And then what's your book, your original thesis? What's the title of it so we can keep an eye out for whenever you are published and become the big bad author?
We'll see again if that happens. But Mantle of Chaos was the working title. I'm sure my editor soon be future editor will cut that. But look forward.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, and I will talk to you very soon again about all of your marketing efforts and your querying efforts and everything that you're working on post book.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Talk to you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, see ya.